going. Okay.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you.
Okay. Oh, kia ora, Mr. Chairman and fellow councillors. Ko Tom Scott Takawenga. I'm Team Leader of Policy and Strategy at Southern DHB, Public Health South. With me today is Andrew Shand, who'll speak for himself, but he'll also speak to our submission as it relates to air quality. As well as providing a bit of contextual information, my verbal submission will relate to water. From our submission, you'll see Southern DHB has a statutory obligation to promote and protect public health. Come July 1st, 2022, Southern DHB, like 22 other DHBs, will cease to exist. We've been told as of that day we'll be employees of Health New Zealand. I would assume that the obligation to promote and protect public health will be vested with that entity or a like entity. Point is, public health is a long-term investment, and despite changes in our structure, it's highly likely we will be continuing to do what we've always done. Through your work with air quality, water and public transport, regional councils are big contributors to public health outcomes in the region. It is for this reason that we're keen to see this work is done well. We acknowledge the pressure the Regional Council is under in terms of the deemed permit process and the implementation of the National Policy Statement for Freshwater 2020. Our people work with your staff as you work through both these processes and are very keen to ensure the public health perspective is clearly articulated. Our values relating to the deemed permit process are connected to the water that is left after water users have taken their allocation. The highest public health value is drinking water. And we're keen to see that water drawn for drinking water supplies is of a standard that serves to minimise any risks to human health. It is for this reason we're supportive of all measures taken to minimise contamination risks. The issue was brought to me, home to me recently when we were looking at the Dunedin city water supply. 30% of the catchment's drawn from the Tairi River through an infiltration gallery at the Outram Bridge. And if we think of the catchment upstream, it's a very large catchment and obviously exposed to a number of potential contamination risks. The point was brought home to me was that if there was a spill of, say, a large quantity of agrochemical in the catchment, there's nothing in terms of the water treatment that would stop that agrochemical coming out of household taps. We acknowledge that with dilution it would be most likely at very low concentrations, but the matter brought home to me the policies that drive practices to the current water catchments can have a very real risk to public health. With this in mind, it needs to be acknowledged that the DCC Water Department will be a very important stakeholder when policy relating to water quality in the Tairi River catchment is under consideration. Second direct public health risk associated with water is that used for human contact. It is this reason that we collaborate with both the ORC, Environment Southland, iwi and local authorities as the summer bathing water programs are considered. This includes standardised approaches to monitoring and effective public health risk communication. Environmental monitoring and communication staff from the regional councils work with local authority, environmental health and engineering staff. Water quality and the factors that affect it are a key issue here. Low river flows too impact bathing water quality, including flows that can give rise to phytoplankton production. These are just some of the samples of work that we do in conjunction with ORC. During the course of the coming years, we look forward to working with you to apply NPS FW 2020 through the water and land plan that is yet to be developed. We're confident that the concept of Te Mana o Te Wai, once it is achieved, will go a long way to addressing public health risks of freshwater also. I'll pass you over to Andrew now.
Kia ora koutou. I'm Andrew Shand, Public Health South. As per our submission, we do not support the view from the council that they should step back from air quality work, including promotion work, until 2023-24. While we appreciate that this work is merely paused while the Council develops an effective air quality program that focuses on strengthening rules on air emissions, we don't feel that there should be any hold up or gap or delivery of the promotion work that goes with that. Also, whilst we support the outcome of a robust plan developed with local communities and partner agencies, we feel that to maintain traction in this area, there needs to be continuous education and promotional work occurring. This work should occur or should continue along with regular monitoring work, so not one for the sake of the other, in order to protect the health of our local communities. As per our submission of 2020 to MFE, improving the quality of our air, regarding the move towards lower emission standards for burners, considerable education and promotion of the use of suitable fuels should run alongside this. So we're talking storage of firewood, dry firewood, etc., for the public. These programs run alongside the implementation of new PM 2.5 standards, which in turn will provide a greater reassurance that there is a lower risk of health effects from air sheds with previously poor quality. Whilst the measurement of PM 2.5 will mostly come from domestic heating in the towns, probably all of it is about from the towns, the control and management of solid fuel heating appliances can significantly reduce ambient particulate levels, PM10 and 2.5. There's some increasing evidence of negative respiratory health effects from long-term exposure to particles in that range PM10 to 2.5 for both short and long-term levels. A reduction in PM 2.5 emissions is associated with a corresponding reduction in premature deaths, hospitalisations and emergency room visits. Sensitive groups such as the elderly and people with chronic heart and lung disease and children are particularly at risk. Also, in passing, we feel that it needs mentioning that as part of our input into the air quality review or part of the new regional policy statement, we've included that for some parts of the region, it could, as an option, needs to be considered, it could be necessary to eliminate all solid fuel burning. And I'll leave the final comment to you, Tom.
Okay. Thanks for listening to us. We look forward to continuing to work with you and your staff and your work as it relates to air quality work, water and regional transport during the coming years. And feel free to ask any questions relating to this presentation or our written submission.
Councillor Robertson.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for your submission and for coming along. I was wondering about the balance between being warm for health benefits and having clean air. We often have a debate around this table that it's one or the other. Do you have a comment on that?
Yeah, I think there's a number of factors that need to be brought to bear in that. I mean, clearly, if you were looking at phasing out, say, solid fuel heating, you would need to ensure that there was a reliable electricity supply into those communities, which possibly they might not have at the moment. Having said that, we're aware that certainly in other countries, there are options like where you might have a centralised boiler for the town with effective pollution control systems that could reticulate steam or heat to the community. So, I mean, those kind of options are potentially available.
Yeah, fully understand the question, and this is definitely one of economics and equity, I guess, as well, and that you may be penalising people that can at least afford type thing. And obviously, yes, you're quite right. Indoor temperatures at a certain range, especially at night, contribute towards well health or good health. But by the same token, there is technology there to enable you to use low emission type burners or ULEV, whichever way you intend to go. The problem, of course, is one of economics, hence our comment and our support when we wrote to MFE, saying that we felt there should be necessarily injection of funding to compensate for that, to try and even the playing field and make sure it's a fair and equitable kind of process.
Councillor Laws.
Thank you. Yes, I was to pursue that particular issue with you. Are you aware that moving to low emission burners doesn't actually reduce substantially or even significantly PM2.5 or PM10 emissions in high-risk airsheds?
I think that's probably the reason why we have suggested that the RPS actually does have a clause in it that basically acknowledges that complete phase out of solid fuel burning might have to be an option in those airships.
Which then leads to the next question. Surely the greatest risk is the massive increase in electricity prices that is going to be visited in the very near future. And what are you doing about that?
What can we do?
Sorry, I think it's probably fair to say that with electricity is but one option. It's not the only option, and if it's heating technology will get, as time goes on, I would imagine, get cheaper in terms of costs of electricity. I know certainly heat pumps of, say, 10 years ago cost an awful lot more to run than, say, a modern heat pump.
Councillor Calvert.
I'm wanting to tease out just a wee bit our role in what's going on here. It seems to me that central government puts out minimum standards and things of generally. Central government, through you, does the education bit at the bottom because it's really into public health, some of these things. Our role in the middle seems to be sort of a regulatory monitoring role in the middle of here, but you're suggesting, I think you suggested that our role was educational and things, and I'm thinking the government's at the top here, the government's at the bottom, we're caught in the middle with the regulation. But I'm not saying it's not a good role, but surely your role is that one of education and things as part of central government deciding something and you contributing to that, and you asking us to lobby central government seems strange because you are government. I don't. Where do we all fit in here?
Yeah. I think certainly in the past when we had the clean air campaigns running, particularly in central Otago, it was a combined effort of ourselves, ORC Comms, the air pollution specialists, and people who do the regulatory work. And it was, I guess, through our combined efforts that the campaign ran. And if you were to say that you weren't going to fund that, presumably that would be the comms component to it, because presumably the regulatory and the specialist air pollution role or the air pollution monitoring roles would continue.
And you'd continue doing your comms thing because that's what you do.
Well, we supported your comms. You guys got the messages out. We provide you with the technical information
but it's in your direct role, isn't it? Public health education.
Public health education is probably not our direct role specifically, but it's part of our role. Yeah.
Thanks very much, gentlemen, and thanks very much for taking the time to come and talk to your submission. Thank you. Then we'll move on to submitter number 292, which is a Fiordland Marine. No, you're going. Oh, where you going? Yeah, that's right. Yeah, which is the Fiordland Marine Guardians, Rebecca. Yeah.
It'll be made different by
Because
the
I
whole new,
couldn't,
who knows where.
when I looked through all the submissions last night, I couldn't find Rebecca. It was only till I signed the letter, you see.
Yeah, I agree with
Signed the letter. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah. Good morning.
Kia ora koutou.
Thanks very much for coming along. So we'll give you a bell if you need to at about 7 minutes, and another minute to wrap up if you require that, and then we'll have some question time.
Fabulous, thank you.
Thank
Actually,
you.
my submission will be pretty brief, so I have lots of time for questions. So yeah, kia ora koutou katoa, ko Rebecca McLeod toku ingoa, and I'm here today representing the Fiordland Marine Guardians, of which I'm the chairperson. The Fiordland Marine Guardians, there's 8 of us, and we are appointed by the Minister for the Environment under the Fiordland Marine Management Act. And obviously, the clues in the name, our main focus is on the Fiordland Marine area. However, we are also obligated to focus on issues beyond the Fiordland Marine area when we feel that those issues are posing risks to the Fiordland Marine area. And a hot topic for us is marine biosecurity. We spend a lot of time working on marine biosecurity in around Fiordland. Just like on the land, there are a number of pests that pose a threat to the marine environment, animal and weed species. Just like on the land, these marine pests have the ability to affect and alter the ecosystem. Just like on the land, they have the potential to damage the economy. But unlike their terrestrial counterparts, once these marine pests arrive in an area, we have very limited tools to actually deal with the incursions. So these pests arrive, they're transported around the world and around among regions within New Zealand on the hulls of vessels in ballast water and on marine gear like fishing gear, anchors and chains and moorings and things like that. Luckily here in the south we have a small number of marine pests that have managed to get here so far. However, we only need to look to the North Island and the significantly higher number of marine pests that the regional authorities are dealing with up there to realise that the tide is moving south, and it's only a matter of time before we increase the number of marine pests that we have down here in the south. So prevention really is the best approach to dealing with marine pests, and we were very heartened to see in your consultation document that you are seeking feedback on pest management, and that you're particularly floating the idea of having a new sort of increased biosecurity focus, including the marine area. So that's excellent. So I'm here to tell you that this isn't just about Otago when you're making these decisions. It's also about being a good neighbour to other regions. I guess I sort of see some synergy in the good neighbour rules in the regional pest management plan. Same thing applies in this sense, but we're talking about your neighbouring regions. So your actions in the marine biosecurity space here in Otago have significant implications for Canterbury, for Southland, and obviously my particular area of interest for the Fiordland Marine area. So we really want you to make sure that you resource this appropriately, and compared to the level of resourcing that we see within the Southland Regional Council, it looks like the Otago Regional Council has been quite light on focusing marine biosecurity, and particularly staff that focus on marine biosecurity. So we hope that you're going to be increasing that resource. But we also want you to collaborate with the other regions, and there's an enormous amount of expertise and willingness to collaborate among regions at the moment in the New Zealand scene. In the North Island at the moment, at the top of the North, the neighbouring regional councils, there's 5 of them, have got together to develop the Top of the North Biosecurity Partnership, and they're making real progress in developing a multi-regional marine pest pathway plan. And the whole idea of these pathway plans is to get educational messages out to vessel operators to ensure that they're not inadvertently or deliberately spreading marine pests from region to region. So they're sharing resources on that, and together they're stronger. We have a Fiordland Marine pest pathways management plan, and we were the first region or sub-region in New Zealand to develop a pest pathways plan, and I'm keen to talk to you about that if you want to know more information. But it only starts at the boundary of the Fiordland Marine area. So for it to work, we need to make sure that every vessel that comes into the Fiordland Marine area is aware of the plan and is acting in accordance with it. It's all around making sure that their hulls are clean, that their gear is clean, and that they're not bringing pests into the area. But if they're coming from ports that are dirty, are full of pests, then it's very hard for them to comply with that plan. And we get vessels in Fiordland, and you'll have the same in Otago, that come from all over the country. And all of these marine pests that we're talking about are only one boat ride away from making an incursion in your area. So it's a lot easier to work on these proactive and preventative approaches rather than trying to deal with a marine pest once it's in the area. We work really closely with the Southland Regional Council. They're one of the agencies that report to the Fiordland Marine Guardians, and they've indicated to us that they're willing to share their expertise with the Otago Regional Council, and they're keen to create a collaborative partnership to develop a sort of bottom of the south marine pest pathways plan. And they have a lot of expertise in that council that they've developed through dealing with an incursion of an invasive seaweed in Fiordland. So I really encourage you to get your staff to work with them collaboratively. That's all I really wanted to say, but I'm happy to take any questions, and thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you, Rebecca. Councillor Deaker.
Rebecca, thank you very much, especially for elevating this issue, which I don't think I've ever heard talked about around this table. What is it exactly that Environment Southland does that we don't do? What actions do they undertake?
They have a number of staff now that are focused specifically on marine biosecurity. They have a comprehensive plan in place in terms of proactive approaches through. They own this pest pathways management plan, so they manage that, which involves a lot of public engagement and issuing clean vessel passes to vessels that want to travel into our area.
They actually inspect the hulls of it.
They also do regular compliance trips. So they'll go with the other agencies. They travel into Fiordland and board vessels, and they send divers down and check the hulls of the vessels. And they also have a monitoring program in place where they go to areas where, like popular anchorages and structures in the marine environment where you might first expect to see marine pest incursions. So they'll be monitoring those multiple times a year. And we've just received jobs for nature funding to do a big Bundaria, which is an invasive kelp, a control program in Fiordland. So they'll be managing that program, recruiting divers, training them up to be underwater biosecurity surveillance technicians, and controlling the spread of that awful pest in Fiordland. So they're doing a lot, but I think they really want to be doing more. They have an enormous coastline, Southland, and a very small ratepayer base. They also have Rakiura, Stewart Island, in the Orohi, so that's a massive coastline for them to deal with, and it's quite a pristine coastline, so they're definitely wanting to do more work down there too. So lots, but not enough.
And so Councillor Wilson and Councillor...
I'm happy to send one, but I need an email address if we can get one.
Yeah, got this goal from Jasmine, no trouble. Councillor Calvert.
Just very quick, I see your responsibilities for providing advice to ministers, government departments and Environmental Southland. Isn't this something that it would make sense for you to be advising the ministers to create a fund or a thing so that everyone can get together on it? Because this isn't an area, it's not, your responsibilities are to the minister and to Environment South and things, whereas you want us to spread it around, which makes sense because water doesn't sort of soften the boundaries. So it isn't. So yeah, can I be suggesting that you encourage the minister to get involved with a fund that we can then get together with other councils?
Yeah, that's a good point. We've there's been a lot of there's been a lot of, I understand all the regional councils have been collectively lobbying the minister, and we also have a direct audience with the Minister for the Environment and Biosecurity. So we've been telling them that we think that, it's all good to have these individual pathways plans, but we really need a collective approach for it to be truly effective. They've appointed now somebody within Biosecurity New Zealand to work on developing a national pathways approach, but it just doesn't seem that there's the strong willing from the central government to be driving that. And so what we're seeing is these regional collectives in the meantime coming together, and what I think is going to happen is that eventually all of these regions will end up doing a national approach with the support of central government, but it's not, I don't think it's going to be driven by them. We will keep telling them that that's what we think should happen. But
if you want support to central government, that's different.
There's a question. Thanks, Rebecca. This strongly aligns with the regional pest management plan, or particularly the focus on working with our neighbours where, a particular pest needs a collaborative approach. And also in our pest plan, we listed some, there was half a dozen marine pests that were sort of under watch, so to speak. So I think what you're asking us to do, we've sort of got a policy framework that actually exists and directs us to do this sort of thing. So thank you.
Yeah, we discussed specifically this issue as well and made sure that our pest plan did incorporate and enable it to happen too, and it was envisaged that it would. So, yeah.
We will get an email address for further contact, and Jasmine will pass that around. Thanks very much indeed for your time, and thanks very much for your submission.
Thank you.
Thank you. Fiona next. Res Awesome, Fiona Clements.
Oh.
Just page 243. Good morning.
Kia ora.
We'll give you a wee buzz at about at 7 minutes and a final wrap up at 8, but you don't need to take that long, but if you've certainly got all that, and then we'll have some question time. So thanks very much for coming.
Kia ora koutou, ko takitimu te mauka, ko aparema te awa, ko te ara akiwa te moana, ko takitimu rawa, ko uruao rawa, ko wairoa rawa, ko viola rawa, ko Lady Igadia, rawa ko mermaid tuku waka, ko kaitahu kati mā moe waitaha tuku iwi, ko Clan Gordon aho, ko takutai o te titi te marae, no otipoti tuku kāinga inaianei, ko Paul tuku mātua, ko Glenys tuku whaia, ko Fiona Clements tuku ekua. Kia ora. I'm here today as the Kai Whakahaere of Resourcem Limited. We are awesome resources for zero waste management. The government has declared a climate emergency, yet here we are still trying to convince the people who represent us and our regions that this is a reality. It's almost beyond comprehension that in 2021 people still aren't recognising the signs on our doorsteps. Your plans don't go far enough to implement appropriate action for our region in regards to reducing emissions, mitigation planning and resilience building. From the Alps to the ocean, we have a responsibility to understand how our unique ecosystem works together. And as the Otago region encompasses this pathway to the sea, we must truly understand the process and how much we affect its ability to deliver arable soil, fresh water and whenua for our survival. We know this issue will displace many humans from our current ways of living and their healthy, secure homes. And when we already have displaced humans and our own under threat from sea level rise in places such as South Dunedin, we have to work to adapt our ways of being to accommodate these new spaces and places we now find ourselves in. Your ability to effectively regulate environmental degradation in our region is not reflected in this long-term plan. The allocation of only 1.3 million budget for safety and resilience is not reflective of the times that we live in to support a continued constructive effort to reduce the impacts of climate change. A declaration of a climate emergency and release of funds would support the communities to combat and enable them to build their resilience in all avenues, especially soil nurturing, which is composting, native biodiversity planting, soft retreat in coastal areas, improving drought defences, preparation and soft protection for flooding, etc. Working together and being proactive are key to an effective response, and we wholeheartedly agree. To achieve this requires active engagement with the whole community and not just listening to one sector. At the recent Food and Fibre Agri Summit, an idea was proposed that we need to look to the opportunities that the problem provides us. Doing this allows us to find the gaps that are in need of being filled, creating more opportunities for many sectors which are solution focused. From 2012, territorial authorities were required to create a waste management plan in alignment with the Waste Minimisation Act 2008, and for it to be reviewed every 3 years. The ORC waste plan has barely been touched since 1997, with some minor word adjustments within the last year. It does not adequately reflect where our waste plans for our region need to be. This is a key issue of our time and one which works in favour of our carbon zero goals of 2050. Ōtepoti has set goals even sooner, 2030. Where does ORC sit in this timeline? New Zealanders' waste creation is estimated to be among the highest in the developed world. We currently create 734 kilograms of waste per person per year, and that amount has increased by around 20% over the past 3 years. Our consumption rates are rising, yet our infrastructure to deal with it is lacking. You have the ability to create bylaws that help reduce, reuse, and divert waste from landfill, such as single-use cups and takeaway containers. These need to go now, and I will note that there are at least 3 single-use takeaway cups in this room, and don't take it off the table because you need to get a keep cup, honestly. It's so simple. Hands up, who owns a keep cup? Why aren't you using it? You literally, honestly,
It's in the
use it.
You're right.
It doesn't matter. Get another one. You need 2. It's just ridiculous. We want to see more direction and better policy around proper, efficient diversion strategies. This is also especially key around diverting organic waste, which is the main factor in our landfill greenhouse gas emissions. Composting is our best chance at making soil, creating biodiversity, and regenerating our whenua. But some help making land consenting processes for composting easier to understand and navigate would be appreciated. It is incredibly difficult to navigate that system. I'm interested to know where you are creating space for waste minimisation as part of your own operations or life. And as a business, we would absolutely love to help your office manage this process. And in doing so, we can assist in creating a better narrative for the Regional Council as a leader in this area. By going through this process as an office, it might help you understand and implement larger strategies at scale for our region, shifting our apathetic nature around the concept of waste to understand it as a viable resource option that can hold value for our communities. We recently participated in the Otago Mayoral Forum Infrastructure Review. Was disappointed to hear that diversion is few and far between in Dunedin City. We are one of very few businesses assisting in this area. Mapping the sector and understanding the volume metrics of need in this region and working together would create a higher volume for resale and reuse. Alongside education, this is a key solution in our waste strategy, collaborating with our surrounding regions to create lower South Island processing facilities that can cope with the volume and types of resource that need to be diverted. And as the regulatory body which oversees land use and monitors leachate from land sites, being better at managing these issues, in our opinion, would include regulating away from landfills. And this can be in the form of funding for infrastructure and education, focusing on diversion and reuse. Biodiversity is key to cleaning our whenua and creating freshwater systems that are regenerative and far away from where we operate now. Our Alps to ocean pathway is interconnected on so many levels. It's currently disrupted by our agriculture sector, which doesn't want to take any responsibility for its carbon outputs nor its fertiliser footprint. Our ways of farming and food creation are becoming dated. We have more and more people moving towards plant-based diets, and the Regional Council must support our regeneration efforts with stronger regulations and monitoring of our waterways and our whenua. There are too many instances of farmers not treating their livestock and whenua appropriately, and the increased impact of this alongside dairy's need for coal as a fuel are raising our lack of diversity as a monumental issue. Our freshwater systems need us. They need us to do everything in our power to clean them and assist them to flow as freely as possible from Alps to ocean. The inhabitants of these waterways also require the same. Our wetlands too require us to stop planting pines at their headwaters. A biodiverse including native planting stock will increase the regeneration of our whenua. I recently stayed at Berwick Lodge for a weekend where my goal was to find a piece of native bush to connect with. I was absolutely shocked at how small that piece of native Kanuka forest was amongst the pines of the Waneta forestry block. But I was even more surprised to see young pines planted in the lower lying sections where wetland and river meet, upstream of the Sinclair wetlands. A sign inside told me that there were protected kōkapu in this river, but it didn't look like anyone really cared about them by the plants in their habitat. I left, dismayed at that decision, but knowing I had seen it for just this reason to share with you today. We have to do more good for Papatūānuku, and as our representatives, we ask you to be bold in your choices here. Tick some easy wins off your carbon zero scorecard and let's get resourceful. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Fiona.
Questions, ladies and gentlemen?
Got my hand up.
Yeah, I'll go to you in a moment, Mr. Councillor Lords. Councillor Robertson.
Some easy wins. Could you give us some? Just for clarity, that's cool.
Coffee cup.
Single-use takeaway
Well,
coffee cups and takeaway containers. Honestly, that's the
that's
first
cool.
easy
Yeah.
win. Tick that off your list. Make a bylaw. Like, get the region doing that. Suck-free Wanaka are doing it. Where's single-use cup-free Dunedin? Where's single-use cup-free Clutha? Where are they? Like, it's such an easy win. Get them off our tables. Get them out of our. I'm sick of picking them up off the street, to be honest. Like, I do pick rubbish up on a constant basis, and I'm sick of seeing them.
I compost them if I do ever get them, but
Well,
yeah.
the thing about the biodegradables and composting them, they actually have no nutritional value in the compost.
No.
They're not good in their compost. They're all filler. Like there's nothing in there that we really want in our soils.
Apart from waste, is there any other, like, for example, the freshwater side of it as well? Have you got any priorities for action that you'd like from ORC?
Around fresh water? Yeah, I'd really like it to be swimmable and drinkable. Yeah, like you need to be regulating everyone who's contaminating into those waterways. It's actually really disgusting to see what's happening to our whenua and our waterways at this point in time.
Councillor Laws.
Thank you. You've demonised agriculture and farmers as animal abusers and environmental vandals in your submission. Do you see any place for them in the New Zealand economy at all?
Small place, yeah, not where they are now though. Farming
So you
needs to
don't-
change
so even-
drastically.
So how would you, in actual fact, if you were going to replace these dreadful people with what? How would the New Zealand economy be sustained?
Grow hemp.
Okie dokie. So that's an intelligent response.
Very good. Councillor Laws. Thank you. Councillor Note.
Fiona, can you tell us a little bit more about the organisation? It's obviously a company.
Resourcem?
Yes.
Yep. So it's a business that I started about just under 2 years ago. We're really working around resource recovery and waste minimisation. We work around education and creating infrastructure. We just got a grant from the council to set up a zero waste event infrastructure for Dunedin. That includes a steriliser wash truck with reusable serviceware, bin signage, waste warriors who can stand at the bins and help people understand where rubbish is going, and all sorts of things like that. We're also working really much in the education space because we understand that people really need more information about our systems that we have now, which we really don't understand. We still think biodegradable products are a really good thing. And so we really need to shift our behaviour and our ways of being around that.
I just wondered whether you have had any interaction with Enviro schools, for example, or are you delivering any particular services to other local authorities or?
We're trying to get that wash truck set up so that it will be contracted to the council for all of the events that they are using alongside. We're mostly working with community events at this point, yeah. We are aware of Enviro schools and we do work with them, and we have had a bit of consult with them, and they're more aware now that they need to be waste auditing their schools because that's actually how we measure and give that quantitative kind of numbers so that we can start reducing those amounts. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks very much, and thanks for taking the time.
Excuse me, I'm coming in, Kevin.
Could you send that question through?
Extremely quickly, I just want to tautoko your koera. Thank you, Fee. It's really good to see you coming out strongly and telling us what we should be doing. Thank you.
Thanks, Alexa.
Thank you, Alexa.
Oh, keep it up. Keep that attitude.
Mr. Ryan.
You worry.
Is this? That's right.
Yeah. Now, for all those sitting and awaiting, I realise we are just tending over a wee bit of time, that we will not shorten up your times, and we'll simply make Councillor Deeker have less time for his lunch. So we thanks for your patience. So we'll give you a bell at 7 minutes. And
that shouldn't be necessary.
Cool. Thank you.
Tēnā koutou. Good morning, everybody. My name's James Ryan. I manage the New Zealand Farm Environment Trust. It's a charity which promotes sustainable farming. So we're staunchly apolitical. We're pan-sector, and our focus is about promoting good practice, and we do that by showcasing or picking out exemplars, farming exemplars, in order to inspire their neighbours to get on the journey. Now, ordinarily, a local farmer would be here presenting our submission. They're busy today. We're running a function up at Cromwell this afternoon, so I've substituted in for them, so apologies. But I know a number of you attended a field day that we ran in central Otago not long ago, so thanks for your support in that regard. So the trust is, the New Zealand Farm Environment Trust is best known for running the Balanced Farm Environment Awards. So we run a number of awards functions, we run field days, and we're involved in a number of other activities, particularly positive storytelling around sustainable farming. We're funded by a range of agri-businesses, and we also enjoy the support of regional councils up and down the country, including through Otago Regional Council. So today I'm not here to ask for new funding. I'm really just here to take the opportunity to seek your continued financial support. Looking ahead to the future, we're committed to continuing to run the Balanced Farm Environment Awards. We're also looking to make a number of changes to our program, particularly around providing or enhancing the feedback that we give to participants in our program, so that we can build the confidence of farmers to implement good practice. We've got a couple of trial projects underway. In fact, I'll be progressing some discussions with your staff to see whether Otago is interested in piloting a couple of programs that we're looking at running, particularly around using some of our former award winners in a mentor role to inspire the next generation of younger farmers. Look, you'll appreciate better than I do that farmers, our food producers, are facing a range of regulatory challenges at the moment. And for that reason, we think it's the role that we play in highlighting voluntary good practice, that role has never been more important, and we see it complementing the important role that the Regional Council is responsible for. And look, my role is to be a point of contact for our key partners and to help provide some coordination across the country. But the success of our program really comes down to the passion of our locals. They don't do it for fame and fortune. They do it, they get involved, they support our activities because they're passionate about environmental sustainability and they want to see the farming sector succeed. That's why a number of them have given up some time today to get out to a function in Cromwell, for instance. We enjoy good support from your staff. Just want to acknowledge them. And as I said, I'll follow up on some conversations I've recently started with a view to potentially piloting a program in Otago, but we're not seeking funding for that. I'm looking for some external funding to help us in that regard. So look, that's it for me. We look forward to continuing to work with you and thank you for your ongoing support.
Councillor Wilson.
Kia ora, thank you. Can I just understand, I don't want you to necessarily answer this right now. We've had a challenge this morning from Andy Barrett, who said you should be actually congratulating the warding or some system of saying, well done to some farmers who are doing a fantastic job keeping biodiversity, and doing good practice. And I appreciate balance is one system of that. The question I've got for you, and if you can email back when you've had time to think about it, rather than right now, is would that be a space that you think your trust could work effectively at in Otago? Or is that the sort of thing that you're looking at for piloting?
Yeah, absolutely. So just let me know who I should, perhaps it's Andrea Howard, I should have that conversation with. I'll take your advice on that, or Gwyneth.
And
James,
Andrea?
Andrea?
Yeah.
Send something into the chair and he will
Chair,
get Andrew,
yeah.
and because
Okay.
we're all interested. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Good.
And Andrew now has a question.
Not
Okay,
Andrea,
good.
Andrew. Okay. James, my question was around the trust and how do you measure success as the trust, as you go about your business?
Yeah, we need to get better at that. So in the past, what we've done is we've measured the number of entrants, attendees at our field days, etc. We're developing a monitoring program at the moment so that we can, let's just say Councillor Robertson's gets involved in our program for argument's sake. We can go back to her in 6 or 12 months and say, in light of the feedback that you received for us, what actions have you taken? And then we can actually quantify whether the feedback that we've given has been effective at achieving some environmental improvements. And if we get really smart, you can actually quantify some of those benefits.
And I just wondered the scope of your constitution, whether it allows you to be a bit more expansive in terms of not just relating to farm environmental projects. And why I raise that, you might be a cluster of lifestyle blocks that back onto an urban waterway, for example. Does your organisation have the scope to be able to take into consideration those types?
Yeah, we're open-minded about that. In Greater Wellington, we do something with lifestyle blocks. We're looking at working more closely with catchment groups as well.
Councillor Scott.
You obviously have a focus on the better farms. Do you monitor or try to measure, farming across the board? I mean, is there positive progress going on, or what is the situation from your perspective? Or do you look at our data? How do you?
Look, I think in my experience, the language of farmers and the agribusinesses has changed quite dramatically over the last 10 years. 10 years ago, most farmers, this is a generalisation, would associate the environment with regulation and compliance. Nowadays, they see it as essential for our success. That's where the opportunity lies in New Zealand, to producing food to the highest environmental standards. So that's not just good for the environment, that's good for their bottom line. So I am optimistic in that regard.
No, but do you measure that performance, or is it, over and above words are easy?
Yeah, that's fair. So we do tend to attract those top performers. So there is an opportunity for us to potentially widen our market. And that's I guess, a challenge for us.
Okay, well, thanks for that.
Councillor Laws.
Actually, that was sort of where I was coming from too. I'm interested in knowing. Well, I haven't finished yet. I was just saying I was coming from that area. So hold your horses. I was going to ask what percentage of farmers in the Otago region would be members of the New Zealand Farm Environment Trust?
Probably over the last, let's say, 10 years, we've had, I don't know, maybe 150 participants directly. That's not to say that they don't touch a much wider pool of farmers. So there is certainly the potential to grow that.
Thank you, Councillor Laws. James, thanks very much for your time. Thanks very much for making the effort to come and talk to us.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Thank you. Keep it up.
Thanks.
And we'll hear from you through. Chair. Yeah.
We'll move on to Brian Dixon.
Thank you, appreciate it. Oh. No, Logan Park? Not Logan Park?
Logan Park High School have caught up an exam.
Okay. I'm glad they're not coming out for that.
That's a great shame. I was looking forward to hearing.
Indeed.
Yeah.
There you go, Brian.
Good, thank you.
Yeah.
Tēnā koutou, Chairman, Mr. Chairman and Chair of the OIC, tēnā koutou katoa to the councillors and staff. Thank you for this opportunity. Thank you for all the arrangements that have gone into allowing us to be here and present and so on. I know it's going to be an arduous couple of days for you, well, a couple of weeks probably. Let me just get my specs out, otherwise I won't be able to tell you what I want to say. So I'm here both as a resident of the region, but also I have background in being the New Zealand representative in an international network of psychology leaders who are committed to applying psychology to help address climate problems. I also chair the New Zealand Psychological Society's Climate Psychology Task Force, and we'd be happy to offer advice to Council, should it wish, on social issues, behavioural aspects of climate change mitigation, adaptation and management of effects on people in the region. I do commend the Council for recognising the effects climate change will have on the region and its people, and the need for all plans to factor in mitigation and adaptation. Can I just check, did you get my PDF document as well as the online submission?
I can't find it, I'm just having a look.
Okay. Right, okay, because I provided the response initially to the form, and then subsequently with the extension, I was able to look at the document that Councillor Chairman
so you gave us two, didn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'd encourage you to look at that.
In the second section as well.
We do know that this region, like most others, has vulnerabilities. Here it's an eroding coastline, low-lying rural and urban land areas, susceptibility to droughts and floods, inundation of South Dunedin, and that inundation is expected to be amongst the most disruptive and costly in New Zealand. Food supply to the region is a major vulnerability for us throughout Otago. As we know from some of those disruptions with Christchurch's earthquakes and the loss of the Rangitata, I think, crossing. So, we are vulnerable, we know that already. While the Council was starting to make plans related to climate change, it needs to commit to increasing the scale and funding of actions around readiness for the climate effects and the need for people to be adapting. Collaboration with other levels of government, iwi, Crown agencies, business, experts and communities is an essential element in ensuring our plans here are effective, integrated across the region and the country, that they're consistent and they're cohesive. I've mentioned in my written submission about Rod Oram and Bernard Hickey having identified local government as major players in implementing effective climate actions, arguably more important than central government, who's the major player at the moment, but it happens on the ground if it's going to happen at all. In my submission, I identified some of the essential collaborations and a number of important programs that the Regional Council, in my view, needs to consider as part of a transition to a carbon neutral future. And I've listed those, they're reasonably comprehensive. Vitally important, though, is the engagement that you have with the public and your communities, and establishing willing cooperation and collaboration by people across the region. And not just those who will be directly affected by the crises like sea level rise affecting their homes and land, or those with extreme rainfall threatening their properties. This is where an understanding of the role of psychology will be of considerable benefit to councils and central government in the future, in that the effectiveness of councils' plans for action and intervention hinge on the level of personal agency that can be encouraged in the citizens. That is their willingness to take responsibility and make commitments to implement change in their lives, their businesses, their activities, and in the decisions and choices that they make. The more our councils can support people to embrace the need for change, and the more support there is for sound decisions and concerted actions, the more likely it is that this region can actually achieve the net zero carbon goals that government will require us to achieve. There are many areas in which council can provide that support and incentives for community and individual efforts. It's pleasing to see that some of the councils in New Zealand are taking up these options, so promoting sustainable housing, water conservation, planting shrubs and trees, restoring wetlands, for example. Gore requires new buildings to have at least 3,000 litres storage water tanks. Other councils provide targeted rates, etc. It's also important, as we heard earlier, about Regional Council removing the barriers so that compliance is easier. We are aware of effective overseas models. We'd be happy to share those. It's essential that you look towards proper representation. STV is a superior model for representation. It's a bit like trying to sell Christmas to lamb. But it's important also to seriously address the prospect of Maori woods rather than being preoccupied preoccupied just with geographically defined populations. In my submission, I highlighted the issue of suspending work on air quality and expressed my dismay to you that you allow major farming burn-offs without permits. They're not managed, not even monitored. This does not reflect a real commitment to mitigation of climate change. You need to reinstate the plan for urgent work on air quality, including rural fires and methane emissions. In terms of funding, and I don't know whether you saw these, but these photographs were taken on a recent trip back from down Southland, Gore. That was the day, the blue sky. That was the burn-off that was occurring. And that was the effect. It was like, turning the lights off in this room. And the response I got from the regional council staff was, we don't monitor it. Nobody
Page
does.
275 of
Yes, thank you.
14.
So those are provided, to bring home for you the significance of that problem. I'll stop there.
Good. Any questions?
South Dunedin, as you alluded to, there's a huge challenge there. It seems to me, well, South Dunedin in 100 years' time is going to look possibly a bit different than it is now.
Very.
But, the people are wedded to the situation, and making a quantum change is going to be difficult. What are the psychology, from a psychology perspective, any comment?
Yep, so some work has been done on that by public health at the university, and unfortunately COVID disrupted those plans. But we're going to be looking at community engagement, what the communities want to do. So communities will often be happier to move together rather than be disintegrated. We have a terrible problem looming with insurance there. So people are having difficulty, and I think that our councils need to start very soon talking to the insurers to ensure that people are going to be supported through. Managed retreat will be necessary in some areas. That can only happen with willingness, otherwise it's going to cause a backlash. You may need to look for areas to talk to whole communities, and those that want to move can move. Taking them on one by one, it's just going to get resistance and anger and distress.
Thank you for that.
Thank you, Brian. Just one wee comment that you did make, which it really is a philosophy that we continue to grow on, is the continue to develop willing cooperation. So I think that's absolutely key for us to be successful in the future. And so thanks very much for bringing that forward, and thanks very much for your time.
Yes, thank you very much.
And the offer for help.
Yeah.
Online.
Thanks, Brian.
So you found your PDF.
Yeah, page 275. We've got that. We've definitely got your PDF. Thank you. I've covered up my page.
Hawkesbury.
Hawkesbury Lagoon, Ruth Ferguson.
Exciting stuff.
That's page 20. It's right at the start, isn't it?
Submission, thank you.
Hey.
I won't do that, so we have a chair.
You can both sit.
Oh, right, there we go.
Second one, Ruth and Julie.
If you'd like.
And Julie, both. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, Flora. Flora. We'll just start by introducing ourselves. I'm Ruth Ferguson. About 2 months ago, I took over as chair of the Hawkesbury Lagoon Committee. I've been on the committee for about 3 years, and I've lived in the area for about 7.
Yeah, Morena Tato, called Julie Gemmell, aho. I am a long-time resident of Waikaiti, and I've been on the Hawkesbury Lagoon Committee for about 20 years, I think, maybe a bit more.
So we thank you for the opportunity to be able to speak today. And I'd like to acknowledge that there has been interest shown by councillors on the ORC. Marion Hobbs and Brian Scott did attend our opening day on January. But generally, we feel quite neglected and forgotten in Waikaiti, and it's only sort of significant events like the recent water crisis that creates any sort of action. So again, we have concern that we have an area of particular ecological interests, but it seems to be ignored. There seems to be concentration, particularly on one area, which is Lake Hayes. So just to give you some background, about the Hawkesbury Lagoon, I'll pass over to Julie.
Right. So the Hawkesbury Lagoon, as you probably gathered, is in Waikoati, in downtown Waikoati. It's a designated wildlife refuge under the Reserves Act, and it's identified as a wetland of significance by the ORC and an area of significant conservation value in the Dunedin District Plan. It's one of the few estuarine wetlands left in Otago. The lagoon harbours many nationally threatened or at-risk species of birds, such as grey duck, falcon, oystercatcher pied stilts. In fact, 21 different species have been identified there. There's some nationally threatened native plant species, such as gossamer grass, and freshwater fish, inaka, and eels. It's highly valued by kaitahu. And in fact, on the ORC website, it says it's highly valued by kaitahu for cultural and spiritual beliefs, values, and uses of wāhi tauka. So there is a significant mahinga kai site on the lagoon, which is looked after by the trustees from Huirapa. It's a regionally significant wetland site for wildfowl and one of 3 wildlife refuges in Otago where shooting is prohibited. The diversity of birds and fish is particularly noted. It's also an important recreation area for walking, bird watching, picnicking, etc. For bird watchers and photographers, it's particularly appreciated as one of the few sites of easy accessibility where people can get close to a range of birds, especially visitors such as kortuku, spoonbills and pied stilts. And in fact, there's a lot of national interest. People, it's very busy with bird watchers and is definitely of interest nationally.
Ruth. So while this is an important wetland, the water quality is significantly degraded, and this is through human activity. Most recent research that's been done, and there has been a bit of interest in the area, was by Nicole Foote, who actually works for the ORC. But in her 2016 thesis, she described the chemical and flora characteristics of East Otago estuaries, and this included 3 sites on the Hawkesbury Lagoon area. She found significant amounts of nutrients such as ammonia, nitrate and phosphate in the water. These were particularly concentrated in Post Office Creek, which is the main water supply into the lagoon. And this has promoted the growth of phytoplankton. And Nicole found abnormally high levels of phytoplankton. The problem with this is the phytoplankton degrade, and this reduces the oxygen content of the water. And this means all species that are dependent on oxygen, from the invertebrates right through to the fish at the bottom of the food chain, are going to be compromised. And there are environmental standards, Australian and New Zealand standards, which are both the Environmental Council and the Agriculture and Resource Management Council of both Australia and New Zealand. And there are many values that are outside their recommended level for a healthy estuarine environment. So it's a really sad story, I think. From a local resident's point of view, there are algal blooms which happen most summers, and this relates not only to a stench to several blocks away from the lagoon, but also to a problem of midges. So where Nicole's work has taken us is to this particularly high levels of nutrients in Post Office Creek. And so it's really hard to get anything done about that. I phoned up the ORC and spoke to a senior, one of the senior water people, particularly because I was interested in the level of sediment in the Post Office Creek and ways to measure it. I come from a scientific background. And what I got back was that this was a small catchment and it was really of no interest, and there wasn't going to be much assistance from the ORC because of the size of the catchment. The best suggestion was that I could walk up and identify points of pollution and then report it to the pollution line. But as far as I'm aware, the pollution line doesn't really follow up on anything. So I don't think that's particularly useful way to go. Another issue, though, is the presence of a tip site, an old tip site, and this extends from the lagoon edge through to Inverary Street. I understand it was part of the Silver Peaks County Council site. On anniversary day, I decided I'd help the lagoon area by going and picking up rubbish around the lagoons. And I walked right around the top lagoon. And what I discovered was that the tip site was actually discharging material into the lagoon. I picked up all manner of things. There was a lot of metal that was emerging out of the banks, so tyres, medicine bottles of historic interest, and so on. It is an identified hail site on the ORC website, but the level of contamination has not been investigated, so we don't really know what is leaching out of that site other than what we can see. On Post Office Creek catchment too, and close to Post Office Creek, there are several other hail sites that are identified. So we need to know what the risks are before any remedial action can be taken, and then there needs to be some organisation which takes over the remediation of that. So we find it hard to understand why one particular area has been singled out in the 10-year plan, and we asked that you would consider other areas, particularly those of major ecological importance like the Hawkesbury Lagoon. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Deegar.
Yeah, thanks Ruth and Julie for highlighting this issue and for acknowledging that the Eco Fund has helped with water monitoring equipment and so on. Your plea, and you've just said so verbally as well, is for us to include in this plan funding for the Hawkesbury and similar. My question is, what kind of funding, what scale, and where would it come from? You see that in our consultation document, we've put forward a range of options for funding of Lake Hayes work. How much would we need to invest in Hawkesbury, and where would that money come from? Local ratepayers?
I think what needs to be done is at a catchment level, and I think again it becomes it's not necessarily related to one community who live there. I mean, there are areas that need to be identified that be cleaned up, and then those areas that are surely the responsibility of the people who own those particular sites. I think the committee can help by helping with planting on some of those sites, and I think there are also funds available for helping plant areas that may be discharging. As far as hazardous sites go, then I think there needs to be funding available, and I think it's through the ORC would be appropriate.
And roughly how much?
I don't know. I've got no idea. Well, but until the actual level of contamination is assessed, then we really don't know what needs to be done. And it would seem that when you've got a valuable catchment, that part of the ORC monitoring should be that you actually identify what level of contamination you have and the risks.
Councillor Scott, then Robertson.
Yeah, I mean, the picture you painted is scandalous, really. I mean, it's a beautiful lagoon. It's got wonderful, bird life, wildlife, but there's a water quality issue. Now, you said that there's a landfill potentially going into the lagoon. Well, we have got a pollution hotline. I know you've questioned it. Well, that needs to be run. You look at what happened on the coast when they identified a landfill into a waterway, and that needs to be actioned with some accountability. From a governance perspective, my understanding is that our pollution hotline works and is functional, so that needs to be used. So that's the short-term picture. The medium to long-term picture is to establish a management plan like we're endeavouring to do with Tomahawk, Lake Hayes, Otago. And that's what this is sort of crying out for. Now, ideally, we can get a funding situation that we can then encapsulate you know, the Hawkesbury Lagoon and others. So that's the challenge. So my question is, what do you think of that?
Yes. Yeah. Brilliant.
Well, that's what we're going to do.
Councillor Robertson.
Yeah, it's kind of similar, but the council is currently prioritising and objectively looking at projects across Otago. But yeah, you're right, there's 3 in there at the moment that are clear. However, you're saying that there are other wetlands and lakes, particularly in Otago, that need to be looked at objectively. We've had the question, so I'll ask it to you as well, about if that's the case, you're asking the council to broaden our funding right across Otago for any degraded waterways that need funding, or are you putting to us that we've got the wrong ones and we should be targeting different ones and we should be rating those communities, or is it the former, which is a broad Otago problem that you've put to us? Yeah, which would be more general rated, I suppose, because it's fair and incorporates all of Otago.
Well, I think we can be magnanimous and say we would like all wetlands to be checked out, I suppose. But I mean, I guess we're saying ours is noted as one of, you know, of national significance. So should we be looking first at those that are actually already being, you know, given that
objectively prioritised?
Prioritised, I think.
Yeah.
I've had Councillor Forbes waiting impatiently right from the very start that I neglected, and so I'll take her as the last question.
This is a really important point that you're bringing out, Ruth, the two of you, and I think we have to think this through very, very carefully. I'd like your input on that in terms of looking district-wide at all of the projects and how we fund them and how we prioritise. And I wonder if some of that prioritising comes down to where the community is at in terms of getting their management plans together and getting their science together around this, and how we as a regional council support this. I mean, one of the things we're seeing with Lake Hayes is the community over 35 years have collected a huge amount of data and management plans and so on. So I'd hate to think that Hawkesbury Lagoon takes that long. So how can we speed up this process, and how can we fund it so that the people who are doing the work aren't the people that are paying for the for doing the remediation?
There has been a lot of work done. It was there have been the previous chairperson and the committee got several consultancy committees, and we've got at least 4. They're all on our website of different reports on and management plans for it. There was one that did cost out the management plan, but it's out of date now because I think it was 2010. But some of them were there, and the trouble is getting any further traction, because one of the problems seems to be a fair bit of buck passing between different organisations. I mean, you're dealing with DOC, you're dealing with DCC, ORC, so it becomes very difficult. And I've certainly experienced that, the buck passing, and I picked up a report in the ODT of buck passing some years ago. So I think this is a problem. I mean, we've had that information for quite some years now, probably 5 years.
We have done a lot of work. We have had several reports done.
Being able to move on it is extremely difficult.
So we need to find a solution to get these moving. Thank you very much.
Correct. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's right.
We now
mentioned how nice it is. It's lovely. And we should all go for a walk.
Yes, you should.
Good.
Yeah.
Yes, we tell you where the rubbish is. It's on that.
Page 255 or page 257, University of Otago.
Hail signs.
Yeah, we'll keep that.
To start? Shall I get underway? Yes, well, we give you a week, being at 7 minutes if you need that long, then another one at 8, just to tidy things up, and then we'll get some question time. So thank you so much. Thank you. Kia ora tātou, councillors. Thank you for allowing us to make a submission. I have with me Mr. Kevin Wood, who is the strategic resource planner at the university. If I can, there are a number of matters in our submission that really don't look at a 10-year window at all, and to me they can be dealt with very quickly. For instance, the Leith. Can I just say thank you very much for the work in the Leith. That is just it's added to the amenity values in the area of the university to such a large extent, and please, can we work with you if you want to continue with that project to the coast? Public transport, we realise you've got your 10-year public transport plan coming out, so we will submit on that. Connecting Dunedin, we are undertaking our own master planning at the moment, which looks at the connection of the north and the south campuses and the implications of the road, of course, the highway. So if we could please work together on that as well. But our plan, Kevin's heavily involved in that, and that's probably going to be, it will take probably most of next year to get that to a point where we can get anywhere. So I want to look at the 10-year window, which is very close to the UN Sustainable Development Goals, the 2030 goals, and the issues which you touch on in terms of the page 20 and 21 of the plan. Can I just say that I appreciate that these plans are heavily involved in how you fund work streams and address the imperatives of your policies and your planning instruments and so forth. I wish to talk about a collaborative approach of doing this, which is not so much a funding approach. It's to use the strengths of your body as a public body and the university as a public institution, and looking at the region's needs in terms of the sustainable future. And I've always looked at three domains, if you like, when you're looking at long-term planning. One is ecology, one is economics, and one is ethics, where you're dealing with intergenerational issues. It's, of course, which the regional council was involved with. So in terms of the work that you're doing on biodiversity planning, land use planning, air quality, all those matters, the university, as you know, has significant expertise within its various divisions and within its research projects across all those areas. And it did seem to me when I looked at this that we've got to get a more collaborative approach for dealing with these things, where the regional council and the university council have a conversation and get a framework, because at the moment it seems to me that the university is probably being used in terms of studies and work in different work streams. But there is the issue of planning how we're going to get to 2030 or 2031 in a state where we've got a framework that's operating and working well. In terms of climate, in terms of biodiversity, all those areas, there's a lot of work being done, particularly on the looking at in central Otago, looking at the propagation of seedlings for planting in terms of the carbon mitigation projects. But there's a huge amount of work to be done there. The university is putting a lot of resources through its botany department into that area, and trying to establish partnerships for the offsets and so forth. So to me, it's a crying shame if we're not working together on these issues and looking at where we can collaborate. I'm sure we are, but it's got to be, because of the short window for these shared humanity issues, we really do have to
make sure we have a robust framework. There's one thing that I noticed that I was a wee bit, just a little bit apprehensive about in the document, and that was the links between energy and food production and energy and renewables in terms of your program for addressing those matters. And we know there's been discussion about storage and things like that. That's all going to happen in terms of this period when it comes to the strategic approach to dealing with that and planning approaches. And of course, the Regional Council will be leading that in terms of not only from a policy point of view, but from a regulatory point of view. And it will be a regulatory forcing approach to sustainability, I suspect. So we have just introduced a new agricultural innovation course, which is part of our applied science course, which is not right. It's not a replication of what other universities do in the agricultural area. It's very much using our applied science people and looking at that. Well worth having a look at that in terms, and we're road showing some of our researchers. They're not, a lot of them are dealing with microbiology, dealing with inorganic materials, as well as the food waste, food production. But it's such a big issue for our region that I thought there might have been some signal, whether that comes through the energy and the food side of it or the agriculture comes through your planning part. I'm not sure. It's hard to pick that up. But there didn't seem to be any reference to energy at all, which surprised me. So that's all I have. Let's get together on this. Absolutely. If we can, because I realise you've got a lot to do with limited resources and funding.
Councillor Wilson.
I have a number of questions about collaboration at both council to your council level, but also having heard Hawkesbury and how they would love to, if there was a portal that they could feed in to get some student work done in their area and how that works. I don't think I can deal with all those questions and where I'd like to take it. Is there any chance that we could put the university up for an hour-long or 2 hour-long workshop about really taking those conversations, which aren't always solely LTP? I think it would be a really neat place that we could put that. And I'm not quite sure what the process is for that, because I don't want to cut this debate down now.
Through the chair, I would suggest that sort of forum would probably be more conducive to actually making some headway. But you're very clear in what you're asking us to do. But maybe that's the first step.
Yeah. So,
I would support that too. It's a very good idea.
Thank you.
I think if we hand that to the chair immediately to take note and come back to us with a plan to facilitate that would be.
It would certainly be great to be sooner than later, in order that there are some ideas there that we may need to seed fund for the LTP if we were doing collaboration.
I'd be delighted if we could get together.
Sure. Any further questions?
Sorry to cut you short.
No, not at all.
Awesome. Thanks very much. Thanks very much for your time. Much appreciated.
Good luck.
Thank you. Through it. We're just about page 217.
The new president
for the regional principal.
This is your first outing.
It's coming.
We have a buzzer at about 7 minutes, and then another one at 8 minutes, and then some question time. So I'll let you introduce yourselves to everyone, and that would be really, really good. Even the stragglers out the back could probably do with an introduction as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Mark Patterson. I'm a sheep and beef farmer from Lawrence and the new chairman or president of Otago Federated Farmers. With me has come Riley, our senior policy analyst, who I know will be very familiar to you in the room. My intention is to give a brief overview, hand over to Kim, who's clearly the brains of the operation, to outline our proposal in more detail. Of course, we'll take it as read. Firstly, I would like to emphasise that the farmers of Otago are deeply committed to good environmental outcomes. If we look at the proliferation of catchment and community groups, I think it bears witness to that. By our count, there are some 28 already in operation. From my personal experience, there has been a quantum leap in awareness around the adverse environmental impacts that we may have created in the past, and a genuine determination to do something about it. We want to be in a position to work with our regional council, not against it. We very much support the funding in the draft plan for the integrated catchment groups and welcome we welcome that. And anecdotally, there has been a large improvement on our engagement with on the ground staff, and I think also, in fairness, at a political level in recent times, and we appreciate that. What we are seeking are rules that are sensible, practical and affordable, and that are laser focused on actual outcomes, not heavy bureaucratic compliance, where only consultants and lawyers win at the expense of actual environmental outcomes. In terms of the draft plan, we find the proposed nominal 74% increase in rates both egregious and unacceptable. How can it be that a council sitting on such huge reserves finds it acceptable to pass on such staggering rate increases? We contend that the reason that we are here today facing this prospect is that previous councils have failed to implement the plans of the past. And what are these reserves for if not for a rainy day? And a 74% increase, it is certainly pouring. Briefly, and Kim will speak a bit more to what some of our solutions are there. We also seek urgent consideration for tools to restricting blanket afforestation and carbon farming. There's absolutely a place for strategic planting and offsetting as part of our response to climate change. We know from the Climate Change Commission report and where the government is going on that, that's likely to be an ongoing situation. But where we are sitting today and with the likely level of pricing, we're sitting there naked from a planning perspective, and that needs to change. So both within your own planning processes and the way you talk to the government in terms of it is actually the Labor Party policy to put some controls on this. Lastly, we'd like to reiterate our record of objection to the call-in process from PC7. We have considered this an abdication of responsibility, and we are offended that during Federated Farmers attendance, no councillors or staff have been present at these sometimes bruising hearings to our farmers that have been submitting.
I've been.
Well, you can put that on record. I'm just going by mine. So we note that PC1 and PC8 are not beyond mediation, and we seek a return to that, and Federated Farmers are willing to do a bit. You are asking for much of us behind the farm gate, and we are expecting some hard decisions also to be made around the council table. Thank you. Kim.
Yes, I'm really just to follow through on particularly the call-in processes, which is a major concern I've had today. So I have a bit of a statement after being in court yesterday that I'd just like to read out that further sort of expands on the concerns that Mark has highlighted. So we come to the hearing on the heels of yesterday listening to some pretty harrowing rural mental wellbeing evidence that was presented to the court yesterday on Plan Change 7 from the Rural Support Trust and our rural health professional. We've seen firsthand the impacts of the council's call-in decision on the rural resource users in Otago. No one in that courtroom yesterday was unaffected, but we note, however, that no senior staff member from ORC was in attendance, or in fact, to our knowledge, has been there to listen to any evidence from the water users directly impacted. And we think it's important that you listen to these statements that the communities are bringing to you. In our view, Council's eagerness to please government by blithely adopting all of Minister Parker's recommendations without question, and its subsequent decision to ask the Minister to call in all Otago pending planning processes, has exposed some pretty spectacular failings in Council's processes on Plan Change 7 in particular.
It's revealed council's failures to consult with or listen to the views of those impacted, and an overall disregard of rural wellbeing. Much of the costs, uncertainty and stress of this current Plan Change 7 process could have been avoided had council done its job properly up front and listened to the impacted communities. These prolonged, resource-intensive, stressful and costly processes are a direct result of council's prior failures to implement its plans, its failures to appropriately engage and consult with its communities and stakeholders, and in particular, the flawed and inaccurate advice provided to councillors on the 26th of February 2020 that the call-in of these processes would make them faster, easier and cheaper for council and other submitters. In reality, Plan Change 7 has been none of these things. It has not saved money, time or complication. In reality, it has been arduous, stressful and costly for all involved, not only for the farmers who have turned up to give evidence, but also for all submitters, and in fact for the court and council's own staff too. It is Federated Farmers' firm view that council's approach to Plan Change 7 has been a lesson to all other councils across New Zealand of what never to repeat. Quick and dirty planning is not better planning. It's just a shortcut to a bigger mess. One that ultimately was too eagerly dumped on the court to grapple with and to have to find a way through. Currently, Plan Change 7, Plan Change 1 and Plan Change 8 are all before the court. Plan Change 7 alone is a 3-month full formal court hearing with cost recovery for these lengthy, expensive and resource-intensive court processes proposed by council to now be passed back onto ratepayers through general rates. Total costs of these processes across the region are likely to end up well in the millions of dollars. And this is on top of what the cost will be to submitters and council itself. Federated Farmers strongly seeks that all planning processes resulting from the ministerial intervention into Otago planning matters, which are all a direct result of council's past failed actions and inactions, should in their entirety be funded from council reserves. No ratepayers, rural or urban, should have to pay this price. Council must learn from what has happened over the past year. You must learn to better consult, collaborate with and listen to your residents. Quite simply, you must do better. The cost on our rural families and communities is becoming too high, and we believe you have the power to still fix this, and you must. So that's more directly relating to Plan Change 7, not so specifically around the proposed 47% increase to the rates and the 73% increase to general rates, but we're just finding it's all becoming too much. District and regional council rates are really becoming an overwhelming burden on our rural residents, and wellbeing is suffering. So anything else you want to add?
No. Exactly, well done.
Councillor Calvert.
Personally, I apologise for some of those things. When you say reserves, I mean, what we've got is, as you will be fully aware, I'm sure, a variety of jam jars. You know, there's a flood protection one and there's a building, whatever. What reserve were you imagining?
Well, it's really hard to tell from the consultation document where a lot of these sort of costs are proportioned. I mean, I guess that's for the accounting and financing side to look at which pool is best able to be accessed. But as Mark highlighted, I mean, it's a rainy day, and I know in the council's documents it said that that these reserves were there to keep the financial stability of council and to be there for, you know, to provide that backbone. But if there's a way of accessing these just to try and fund and find a way through, then
I mean, would you imagine Port Otago to be such a reserve?
No, well, I think within that it is Chalmers Properties, which does hold commercial property and you know, various other centres. I think there's a difference between strategic reserves, and I think you'd have to think very carefully about the port. I mean, that is a huge strategic importance to Otago.
When I say that Port Otago is half Chalmers Properties. So.
Yeah. So, but within that, there are some assets within that don't appear to have a lot of strategic merit for keeping them when you're trying to pass on such huge rate rises. I mean, this is very much a decision for you guys to make. We're just saying it's there in quantum. The hard decisions are yours, but there are some options for you rather than just passing them on as rates.
Yeah, we were looking through other we obviously submit on all council plans across the country that impact farmers, and it certainly seems Otago Regional Council's in the best financial position of the councils we've looked at. It's a strong financial position, and in our view, because of the unique circumstances that has befallen the Otago region, it would be great to see a way of finding a way through so that ratepayers didn't have to fund what was now before them. And how that's best done, Hilary, I'm not sure, sorry, but
just
yeah.
like you mentioned reserves.
Yes, well, we were sort of looking at all the different pools, and non-cash assets the council did have, and think there must be obviously significant 100% ownership in Port Otago as one, but yeah, just to find a way through to take the burden off ratepayers.
Councillor Noon.
Thanks for the direct and frank reflection on Plan Change 7. My question is around the reserves, and I just want to pick up on the 47%. And last year there was a general rate increase. It was about a 2.5% targeted rate increase if you took an average across all the targeted rates. So the question is around when those reserves are depleted, do fed farmers have a position in terms of we either top those up or continue to borrow to pay for our day-to-day activities? In other words, using your savings to buy milk and bread. So you see where I'm coming from? So if we're in a position where we need to top up our reserves, which that's where we're at, what other options have we got?
Well, it depends. In terms of borrowing, you're not necessarily borrowing to pay for milk and bread, but you might be borrowing for, capital expenditure at some point, which is a different story. Then you can spread it out. It's a multi-generational investment. So, but that's very much that's a decision for you guys. So that's what we elect you guys to come up with those. These are hard decisions, but we're just saying how it washes out on us is unacceptable at this stage. This is, as Kim pointed out, we're facing the district, significant rises outside of Clutha in the other district council rates. So it's all, and plus all the behind the farm gate stuff that we're having to do as well. So we're on both sides of this equation. And as you'll see in our submission, a more detailed written submission, there's the option of changing the formulas a little bit. So the general rating, I think you're at 25% or whatever. You could go up to 30%. It'll be a very minor change in terms of what an urban ratepayer would pay, but it would make a significant cost to the average cost saving for the average farmer.
Yeah, and that's a tinkering with the uniform annual general charge that currently sits quite low. I mean, it's sitting at 25% across general rates, but it can be raised to a maximum of 30% across all rates. And that would make a difference, a real difference on the ground for farmers. When is that net benefit that's equal across all properties, that farmers pay the same as an urban person versus paying 10 or 20 times more because the footprint of their property is that much bigger. It doesn't reflect the ability to pay. Farmers are struggling at the moment as much as many urban people are. So we're just asking for a bit of equity and fairness.
Any further questions?
Yeah, I think the RSC needs to take some of your comments on the chin. I accept that. What about from the Federated Farmers' perspective, the fact that there was a 30-year window transition for the mining privileges with minimal environmental obligations with that? Does Federated Farmers take any responsibility or acknowledgement that maybe things could have been done better?
The farmers were working well and truly towards the deadline of October 2021, so I'm not aware of anyone that was going to be missing that. They were working in good faith towards a statutory deadline based on advice that council had provided to them over the time. There's this, what I consider to be a bit of an urban legend that farmers have been sitting on their hands watching this, but they've had a lot of conflicting messages from council. It hasn't been a well-managed process. Over the last few years, council's put considerable resources into it, and that's been great. But then at the very last minute, a year before the end legislative date, the goalpost was completely shifted and taken away from them. So I think obviously there's been, a misconception that farmers weren't going to meet that deadline, and they weren't given the chance to show that they were working with consultants, getting the cumulative data that's needed from Fish and Game and Forest and Bird and Ngāi Tahu to ensure they can meet that deadline. And it's a lot of background work. So I think the responsibility falls on everyone, and there was a lot of hard work going on behind the scenes that hasn't been reflected.
Thank you.
Could I also add to that, slightly to the periphery, but while we're on in the broad subject, to me, the biggest lost opportunity that we've had here is the Falls Dam. It's the answer to a lot of the issues. If we raise that dam 6 metres, we could have all the river flow. A lot of this, trying to divide up a very small pie, could be taken right off the table. And there was, and potentially still is, there certainly was central government funding and co-funding for that sort of thing. But it seems that the cats, and I've had it, in a previous life, I've had attempts at doing this. It was very hard to herd the cats to get everyone going. But I think that's the sort of thinking we need. We need some big picture strategic thinking rather than this kind of fighting over a dwindling or small resource.
Yeah.
Councillor Wilson.
Plan Change 8, thank you for raising it. Could you advise, you said there's potential for it. Do you see it blowing out like Plan Change 7, or do you think there's a way forward?
I don't think the court will allow it. I think that there will be, hopefully, I think there's a strong engagement and desire of every party to try and work together and do what up front should have happened before Plan Change 7 was notified, to ensure that people can work together and find common ground to conference and caucus and mediate. And I'm hopeful that we can find solutions that work for everyone outside the court process, before that hearing gets there. So I think that can still happen.
So that was put up as an option before Plan Change 8 was called in. Is it happening by direction of the Environment Court now?
Yes, that is. Mediation and conferencing has been set down, and the court's working constructively with them. And again, we've put it out there. We want to work up front with council. Council's got some great staff, some great management, and obviously some great councillors. We want to be working with Fish and Game, Ngāi Tahu, Forest and Bird and others to try and find common ground so we can get Otago moving.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I apologise.
Thank you very much, Mark and team. When you hear care consultations underway right now, and all the scenarios around Falls Dam and what can be done there. Actually, it's not there as a solution at the end, but there's a bit of a bright light there. Look, thanks very much indeed for your message. But I'd just like to share a message that we had from submitter Brian Dixon that I sort of took on board really well, and that was to continue to develop willing cooperation. So I think that's a key to all of us, to make sure that we, with all these groups that are submitting and working within the community, that we continue to go along that track. So thanks very much indeed for your time.
Thank you very much, councillors.
Thank you, Simon, for all your hard work.
I don't know what your plans are. If you're hanging around for lunch, I'd be happy to have a quick yak, but I happen to be in town for another meeting, which is why.
Oh, but thank you.
We've got one more submitter now.
Yeah. Just bear with me. I'll just grab my computer back alive.
Sorry, I believe we've got John and Amanda from Glenorchy.
We have the Glenorchy Community Association. We switched on. We're coming through.
It's not Amanda. John.
Definitely it's not Amanda, but I think it's on Amanda's computer. Gentlemen, we'll give you a wee buzzer at about 7 minutes, and then a final buzzer at 8 minutes if you need that amount of time, and then we'll give you some question time. So your submission has been read, and take that as please read, and we'll let you underway. Thanks for waiting.
Thanks. Good afternoon, councillors. I'm John Glover from the Glenorchy Community Association. You've got Mark Hasselman, who's also from the Glenorchy Community Association. So conscious that you're running late for your lunch, so we won't make it too painful. I guess from Glenorchy, the message is thank you so much for the good quality work that the staff have been doing on the natural hazards up here and the assessment of that. And we really appreciate the number of councillors and the chairman coming up to participate in the workshops a month or so ago, but just to urge that there is funding for that work to continue. That is so important, that we don't end up halfway through this process and everything goes into limbo. Can't stress that enough. We totally understand that the work will broaden in scope as you dig deeper. Linking to the natural hazards, and I'm just going to make a personal plea for finances from the Community Association. We have just recently got a consent from the ORC for gravel extraction at the Buckleburn, and I guess like a number of community groups, there was quite an unpleasant shock with the bill. We're working with the team to see if we can reduce the cost of that consent, but I guess what we would like to propose is that council establish a fund for covering the consenting costs of community groups, and we're not the first one to come across this, and hopefully you've got some opportunity to do that. So really natural hazards, and for us removing gravel, which helps address some of those natural hazards and the flooding risk, and just trying to reduce the cost of that. So that's really what I would like to say. And Mark, who probably most of you know, runs Temple Peak Station, is going to talk to you about some of the biodiversity and water quality issues. Thank you.
Hello. Yeah, I'd probably come at it more from a farming point of view, really, in terms of water quality, when we get very hung up on sewage systems in towns and things. But actually, the head of the lake is quite a dynamic little community, and we've just set up a catchment group. So at this stage, focusing on water quality and stock wintering systems and flooding of our recent out rivers. We've been looking into that whole regenerative farming approach and how we do it better and less nitrates and wintering, so that's all connected. We just see real collaboration between the rural area and the urban, the village, the Glenorchy village, really. So we're looking at it as a head of the lake, really. We don't want to be sort of broken into different little groups. So we've got a sewage system design there that's struggling, stormwater, and the effects on our whole lake of farming systems. The ORC's been great with as John says, with the natural hazards, and we'd just like to see you keep facilitating that collaboration and enable good outcomes in the long term for the head of the lake. Pests and control, you may not be aware of the fact that our local focuses on predator control, and we've got the Root Burn Dart Wildlife Trust, that's why you've got Amanda's computer, targeting the braided rivers and its predators. And this has led to an application to you now from the Southern Lakes Sanctuary, which is looking to expand that to the whole Southern Lakes, really, taking in Makarora, Wanaka, Glenorchy, and looking at the connection of a much bigger area. We've got wilding pines, which the Department of Conservation's been hammering lately up here. And then we come to sort of more of a biodiversity thing in terms of native planting and stuff. And we've actually, as a little community, raised this initiative that we could start a nursery, and we've got a project behind the whole village now, linking all that up with walkways, and the Trails Trust is linking into that. And the tenure review access points are coming into that stuff, and the wetlands. So that's quite a big network of trails being established and opportunities to plant around that. So we'd like to provide our own seeds for that, because it's virtually impossible to go out and buy 5,000 seeds these days. And it's great if they're actually growing in Glenorchy, they'll just adapt much more simpler. So we just thank you for that support, and we'd like to see better local outcomes for us in terms of our water, catchment groups, soils, farming wise, and biodiversity, and maybe lead to a better community health and social systems and employment. And Glenorchy is a very special place. The head of the lake is a very special place. And I think COVID's really emphasised that for us. And so we'd like to retain that if we can. Thank you. Now what happens? Don't know. Yeah, somebody's blocked there from our RC. Do we unblock them, or do they?
We're still on mute. Back up.
Okay, the QLDC district plan, there's a hearing for a hotel in Glenorchy, right in the middle of the potential flood path of the Reese. Do you believe that that plan is fit for purpose and consistent with what we're trying to achieve up there?
I think we have to be careful when something's still sub judice. I
don't think it is necessarily sub judice.
Oh, it's not.
I can answer that in that the consent was issued and granted yesterday. It's still within the period when people may wish to consider their position on appeal.
Okay, fair enough. I apologise.
Further questions?
Yeah.
Gentlemen, thanks very much for the good work you're doing, and thanks very much for taking the time to come before us and write your submission and talk to us today. So thanks very much indeed, and have a good rest of the day. Thank you.
Very much. We look forward to your support.
Thank you.
I would love to get a copy of that decision and the other.
Is it the end? It is. Are we breaking for lunch? Can somebody tell me, are we breaking for lunch? We obviously are.
Are you there? Are you there, Michael? No.
Breaking.
We've got it. I think we've got 2 on board already, haven't we?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Good. But welcome back, everyone. We have a couple of apologies for this afternoon. Councillor Hope and Councillor Robertson are coming on Zoom, and we've got our Councillor Laws firing away on Zoom, and Councillor Forbes coming in from our Queenstown office. So we're here. We've got a couple of apologies again from Councillor Kelleher and Councillor Hobbs that are unavailable this afternoon. So we'll head straight into it, and we have Cozy Homes delegation, and we're allocating about 7 minutes before we hit a bell, which gives you about a minute to wrap up with an 8-minute sort of time frame, and then open to questions. You don't have to extend things out to that 8 minutes, but that's certainly available to you. So thank you.
Tēnā koe, Mr. Chairman. Tēnā koutou, and I'm here obviously juggling different portai this afternoon, and I don't think in either instance we will trouble your timers too much, and we'll be in the hands of the meeting as to how long your questions would take. In the first instance, I'm here presenting on behalf of the Cozy Homes Trust. My name's Aaron Hawkins, I'm the chair. This is Dr. Jeremy Baker, our manager. I will speak briefly to our submission and defer to him to answer any of the questions. It is his field of expertise and not mine. Our submissions will take as read, and it's reasonably self-explanatory. We have in parts of this region significant challenges with air quality, which is of concern to regional government, and at the same time we have significant challenges with housing quality, which is the core part of our business, if you like, is improving housing outcomes or improving health and well-being outcomes using housing as the conduit. And where our work and your work overlaps is that the solutions often in terms of better healthy housing and better air quality overlap. And that has been recognised by what has been a strong and collaborative relationship between Cozy Homes and the Regional Council for a number of years, including the funding that has generously been provided. And I mean, we welcome the direction of the ORC in reviewing the air quality plan. It seems like a timely thing to do, to look at the issue and look at the things that we are doing or could do better or differently to achieve the outcomes that are desired. And we would welcome the opportunity to be a part of that review work as an organisation that has a keen interest in it. What concerns us is the suggestion that the Regional Council would stop doing the work that it's currently doing while that review, or the non-regulatory part of that work, while that review is undertaken. As we all know, the plan and strategy and policy writing process within local government isn't always efficacious, and you have a lot on as a regional authority, and we would hate for there to be a gap of a number of years potentially before we get to pick up from the work that would be left off should the proposal go ahead. And I just want to lastly thank you actually for highlighting the decision that was made in the consultation document for the draft 10-year plan. It's really helpful to bring these sorts of things to people. You know, you can't include everything, but we welcome the fact that it was highlighted, which gave people in the community the opportunity to be able to give feedback on it. And that is the sum total of what I wanted to say to our submissions, sir.
Well,
anything you wanted to
Jeremy,
add?
you want to add?
Not at this time, no, thank you.
Good questions. Councillor Wilson?
I've got 2 questions. One is, for the dollars that we put in, what do you think the dollars are that other people get put in for upgrading their systems and everything else as a proportion? Any idea? I mean, you talked about Arrowtown being a success because there was a whole lot of more people improved their the subsidy uptake. So for the 45,000 we put in, what do you think the subsidy uptake was to improving the air quality in Arrowtown? Any idea?
In terms of a direct impact?
Yeah, $1 to dollar. So we've just had Predator Free and who talked about 1 to 1 and 1 to 2 subsidy or dollars in. And I'm just wondering if we've got the same sort of, any ideas that $1 in and we get 5 in from subsidies? Have we got any idea about that?
Well, the subsidy program isn't in effect at the moment. And that I think one of the things that was highlighted even in the implementation plan for the 2018 air strategy was actually looking at the clean heat, clean air program and how to target that subsidy better to make it more effective. And so it might be that there are different settings required for different communities. So Arrowtown being relatively affluent compared with, say, Milton is, you know, on the other end of the socioeconomic scale in many ways. And so there might be different settings required for different communities to drive appropriate levels of uptake.
And the second question is just understanding, we've just had Federated Farmers who gave us a bit of a answered Brian Scott's question about why is it taking farmers so long, and I think their response was that we'd taken the foot off the pedal as much and what went in the room. The problem with us withdrawing funding is that what concerns me is a similar way is the loss of momentum. What would the effect? Yeah. What's the effect? I mean, will you almost have to rebuild cozy homes if we don't fund you?
I would say that's probably a fair statement. You know, as highlighted in the submission, it will have a significant effect on our operational budget, and that would potentially put us in a difficult position, you know, if and when the council look to re-engage with us on this air quality work. And I would suggest that, I've lost my train of thought there, but there was the first part of your question.
Was there momentum loss?
Yeah, momentum. And so what I was going to refer to was in the early years of the Clean Heat, Clean Air program, so I'm talking like 2008, 9 to about 12 or 13, when there was a deadline for the Air Zone 1 communities to switch out their burners, when council was actively funding and promoting that program, there was a demonstrated, according to council reports, a demonstrated improvement in the air quality program. Subsequently, after 2013, ECO reduced its insulation subsidy program for a few years, and council backed off promotion of the program, and you can actually see the air quality improvements either plateau or start to creep back up again in the years after that. So I think the loss of momentum is a significant risk if you, quote, take the foot off the pedal. And, you know, I'd also note further that the impacts from exposure to particulate matter pollution are cumulative. So any lost opportunity to make reductions in emissions will have negative health outcomes for Otago residents that could have been prevented if we fully engage in this work.
Councillor Noon.
Thank you, Aaron. In our plan, our LTP plan, the review of the air plan is delayed for a couple of years before it kicks in. You indicated in your oral submission that there would be some support for the city when we trigger that process. So A, I want to understand what that support would be, and B, you understand that it's been delayed for a couple of years. That's in this proposal, or are you telling us something different?
Well, I should probably be clear that I'm not speaking on behalf of the city at all in this instance. So
that's what I just picked up.
You know, this organisation, the Cozy Homes Trust, has an interest in the review of that.
Sorry, I just thought when you said we, I just thought you were just talking on behalf of the city all of a sudden. I realise it's the Cozy Homes Trust.
Yeah, sorry, that's next in your schedule, sir.
Yeah. Okay, so then explain the Cozy Homes Trust contribution to that process. Sorry.
I mean, it's really just an offer at this point. I mean, we welcome the opportunity to be involved in those review processes from the beginning, rather than coming in at the end and trying to use the work that we are doing to contribute to the same goals. And that's effectively the point I was making, is that it's great that the review is happening, and we would welcome the opportunity to be a part of that whenever that comes to being.
So you're indicating you'd be a submitter?
Oh, well, we would take any opportunity that was presented to us by the Regional Council to be involved in that work. Yeah,
thank you. Councillor Calvert.
We've been told at some level that the Cozy Homes Trust funding has not been particularly high quality spending bangs for bucks. Have you got any evidence about that at all?
Well, I would suggest that, we're only in year 3 of that program. And this year, the Clean Heat, Clean Air subsidy, which was I would suggest the main part of that agreement was Cozy Homes Trust was supposed to promote uptake of the Clean Heat, Clean Air subsidy. So without the subsidy in place, it's been pretty difficult to get traction on the issue. I would note in 2019, when we were engaged in Arrowtown, along with the ORC, NIWA, and the Southern District Health Board, I don't have the exact figure in front of me, but the uptake of subsidies in Arrowtown roughly doubled from that work over that winter. And we had hundreds of people that engaged with the Cozy Homes Trust and the other stakeholders around education around clean burning practices and available clean heating appliances. So I would suggest that was successful, and that's the kind of work that we can do.
If you've got any information about a connection between the money we're spending and the outcome that was received, it was that was challenged, that we probably weren't doing as much useful as we might have with that. So, and I will get back to, I'll find the context from where it came to us, but anything you've got that you can send in would be helpful, please.
Sure, and I would note that there was a report presented on the 2019 air quality work to council. It was in February of last year, I believe, and that's covered in there.
Just a question from down this end. So Jeremy, so I know the initial stages of Cozy Home, we had a huge uptake in the Waitaki district, especially in suburbs in Oamaru, which is exceptionally good. So how far down can you determine what still needs to be done, and what do you believe would be the triggers to get that done?
In terms of, I think from the Cozy Homes Trust perspective, there's the broader issue of housing quality, substandard, cold, damp housing. And then, the air, I'd say the air quality piece is kind of a subset of that. So I think on the first piece, in terms of addressing substandard housing broadly, there's tons of work to be done across the region. The ECA insulation and heating subsidy program is a piece to help address it specifically with low-income households. But there are, huge swaths of the population that aren't able to access that program. In terms of air quality, I think the estimate from ORC staff is there's something around 2,000 odd non-compliant burners at this time in the Air Zone 1 towns in Milton. So that gives you an idea of the sort of scope of the number of appliances that we might need to replace under, say, a subsidy program to get the results in terms of air quality that we're looking for.
Yeah, and probably following that under the income test, what work are you doing with central government to change that trigger point? Because that seems to me to...
Well, it's certainly true that uptake has waxed and waned depending on what the criteria might be as set by ECA at any given time. So at the moment, it is limited to homeowners in deprivation index 7 or higher, or people accessing having a community services card in whichever neighbourhood there have been, and there is certainly a challenge for us in being able to. They don't put a sign outside their house telling you that. But what we do notice is that when someone does access it, you get more referrals further down that neighbourhood as people become aware of it. And in previous times, it was focused at landlords and was effectively free or close to free. Uptake wasn't particularly high when that was what the criteria focused on, and I can't speak to why that was.
Even when it was free.
Well, indeed.
Yeah, even when it was free. Yeah. Good. No, that's good. Any further questions? Councillor Scott, I think you had your hand up.
Well, just to follow on from Hillary's comment or somebody's comment that if we put the 45 grand in, what type of numerical outcomes are we going to get over the next 12 months, from the whole Cozy Homes entity? Like we're upgrading how many homes, roughly?
I would suggest if we want to look at the outputs in terms of upgrading homes, in addition to funding the Cozy Homes Trust, ideally we would reinstate the Clean Heat, Clean Air subsidy program that was suspended this year, because that's going to be a vital part of driving people.
So the number of homes that are upgraded is how many?
again, so you're saying if there's no subsidy program in place?
No, if the IRC puts in its 45 grand, what are the outcomes going to be other than, I mean, in terms of home upgrades? Are you saying there's not going to be any?
Whatever.
Maybe what ECA's priorities are going to be at the domestic level, but without there being a dedicated organisation whose job it is to help people access the funding that is available to them, it won't matter so much.
So that outcome is typically like there'll be 10 houses done accessing the central government funding.
Several hundred per year under the ECA program.
Yeah.
But again, that's limited to low-income homeowners that are able to access that. And
so, so we're part of the COG for a couple of hundred houses a year.
That's one way to look at it.
Yeah.
Bad analogy, really. Yep. Any further questions?
Yeah, I'm just wondering.
Oh, sorry, Alexa.
Oh, sorry, I might have missed this one. So apologies for lateness, and I may have missed something. I am unmuted.
I can't find that February paper.
Don't worry.
Find out which one it is. I can't find it in February.
Don't worry. I'm unmuted.
Well, geez.
I think you can speak. It's just they started speaking over
Okay.
you, so they
Can you?
take the mic.
All right.
I'll fill in
what
the
I
void
was,
by mentioning also that the trust has traditionally had a representative of the Otago Regional Council on it. We currently don't, but there are conversations happening at the moment around appointing someone on behalf of the Regional Council to help continue with their work. So it has been helpful historically to have someone in that role.
Great to have someone from Central Otago to do that because of the work needed, but if you get desperate.
That question's been answered. So laws maybe. Yeah. Thank you very much. Much appreciated.
I won't go far. And I appreciate you eating into the time of the subsequent submitter. That's helpful. Thank you, Jeremy. Kia ora koutou. Thank you for having us. I acknowledge the people of Waitaha, Kati Mamoe and Kaitahu as mana whenua of this land on which we stand, and I appreciate that you have a slightly larger remit in terms of the region, but it won't surprise anyone that our submissions are very Dunedin focused. And again, I'll take the submissions as read, but just wanted to highlight a few things. We would encourage the Regional Council to look at some planning milestones and an action plan, if you like, around the climate change work. And it is something that we are certainly keen to work with the Regional Council on, as we have been up until this point. But as our submission sets out, while I think and while Council believes there is merit in there being a greater degree of shared understanding of that work at a governance level, it's important to us that the decision making ultimately sits with the level of government within the jurisdiction of that particular decision, if that makes sense. So, this body gets to make decisions around things that are within the scope of the Regional Council's work, and we get to make decisions around the work that we're doing as a territorial authority. But it is absolutely critical that there is a line of sight between those two pieces of work. And I do want to take the opportunity to thank your officers who have been particularly helpful and constructive, and there is a very strong relationship at an officer level in that adaptation work, and that is important. But adaptation, of course, is only part of our challenge when it comes to dealing with climate change, and mitigation is the most effective form of adaptation in the longer term. And within local government, as a territorial authority, and in this case as a regional authority, the single biggest lever that we have to pull in terms of the zero carbon transition is our transport network. And that is absolutely something that we need to be focused on. And we know, per the recommendations of the Climate Commission, that investments early over the next 10 years will bear fruit, and the longer that we leave investment in this work, the higher the mountain is to climb. And so it is still the view of the City Council that the governance and planning of the public transport system most naturally sits with the territorial authority, with the Dunedin City Council. And there are two reasons for that. One is, and the main reason really is one of strategy and integration, and that we are in charge of every other part of the transport network except that, and it is difficult, even with a constructive relationship between the two authorities, to be able to integrate the work that we are doing and the work that the regional council are doing in terms of the public transport system, because we know that if we are to have any shot at meeting our whether they're local, national, international targets around climate action, that a greater use of the public transport network is vital. The second argument has always been around ambition and aspiration, and I won't dwell on this too much. This will get covered off in our submission on the draft regional public transport plan, which is coming before council next week. But it is disappointing to us to see little in that draft plan to build on what were very positive steps, I think, in the existing plan. And I'm not just saying that because I was in charge of or tasked with hearing submissions and making decisions on that. You can't argue that the system that we have now isn't significantly better than the one that existed before the RPTP review. There was a big opportunity here to build on that work, and it seems to us for that opportunity to have gone begging. And how it's relevant to this meeting is that the draft plan speaks of trials and trialling new things and new services, and that's great. But there doesn't appear to be anything in the budget to fund said trials, which makes me wonder how they would be put into action. It seems it's a throwaway line in the submission because it's not an easy thing to fit into a submission to a body like the Regional Council, but we get no shortage of feedback on it, and so it seemed worthy of raising here. I recall when the Regional Council were going through the last regional policy statement process, that one of the 4 pillars of that RPS document was economic development. And my view is still the same as it was then, and that wasn't the place for it to sit. That isn't a key, or shouldn't be a key or core consideration of the regional policy statement. But if this authority is serious about supporting economic development in the region, and one of the most constructive things that we could do is have a conversation, at least with our community, about the form and function of Chalmers Properties and how it functions in the city. And I understand the hierarchy here, and that's a wholly owned subsidiary of the Port Company, which is wholly owned by this body. But their current approach to
let's have a chat about city forests then while we're there.
the approach to freeholding land or not is absolutely the rational response as a commercial entity. But I think publicly owned companies should have a wider remit than that. It's not particularly directive on our part. All we are asking is for us to have that conversation as a community about how Chalmers Properties can function and how it can support development in the city. And following on from that, really, on an environmental focus, fully support the pest control work. I mean, it's speaking of momentum in the previous submission, the work of predator-free Dunedin is something that we can't take our foot off the pedal, and the ongoing support of that work, indeed, increasing of that work is critical to meeting those aspirations. We support the work around water, and particularly water monitoring, and the renewed focus on the Tomahawk Lagoon, which has been a significant issue for those communities for some time, and we would welcome we welcome that. And finally, really just around the air quality stuff, supporting the comments that have been made earlier. That was a brave assertion of me, wasn't it, earlier on around my own timekeeping. And lastly, fully support the approach to funding all of the myriad things that this authority is tasked with doing in terms of increasing the total rates take to put the work that you're doing on a more sustainable footing. It's great to see the regional council doing more work, but nothing comes for free, and that is something that we need to fund as a community ongoing. And that's me. Thank you.
Councillor Scott.
Yeah, no, great. Thank you, Aaron. I really enjoyed your aspiration in relation to comments on public transport and other things. Personally, I don't see in the city the same aspiration in relation to South Dunedin. What I see at this time is a bit of a leadership gap. It's my personal view, and that's why I think in part this council asked to be involved in a working party to go to the next step. This council, in terms of its background, in terms of hazards and technical and so forth, has previously worked constructively with Clutha District with Milton, currently constructively with KLDC with Glenorchy, in terms of their hazard zone, similar type of issues on a very small scale than what's going on in South Dunedin. It seems to me that gap is currently being jumped into potentially by developers, individuals with personal comments.
I'd be for me to chair the meeting, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, I'm just getting ready
waiting for a question.
Yeah. What are we going to do about it?
Is this on his submission?
And why?
Point of order.
A working party.
Point of order. That isn't a part of this. This is Aaron's chance to come and talk to us about their submission. If we want to go to them, then we should have gone to them and asked that.
I'm just replying to what he said here. Is while collaboration on projects is crucial, this needs to be done in a way to ensure ultimate decision making sits with.
Councillor Scott will just
question.
Ask Mayor Hawkins just to give up, and collaboration might have been that answer that you're going to give, and we'll work towards that. So
yeah, absolutely. I'm agnostic as to what a model would be to ensure that the elected members of both of these authorities have a greater oversight of the work that is happening. But we have a collaborative and constructive relationship at an officer level in the work that is going on.
At an officer level. Yeah,
that's right.
Councillor Moon.
I basically had the same question, but I think, and I'm not happy with the answer, but we can keep working on that. Aaron, with regards to public transport, I mean, you made your 2 points about why the city would be a good fit to operate public transport. But would you concede that...
Not operate, we can't operate it. We can govern it and plan it though.
Okay. But would you concede that the regional land transport plan is the overarching high-level document that directs this region in terms of delivering transport infrastructure and services? Would you agree with that?
Well, the National Land Transport Plan is ultimately the higher level document. Yeah. But at a regional level, that is critical. But the regional land transport plan is so opaque as to be impenetrable in terms of being able to give feedback on its relative priorities. So, and I made that fair comment when we submitted on it. It is hard to it's hard to read that document and come to any meaningful conclusion about why the projects that are contained within it are prioritised in the way that they are.
In terms of delivering a better service, what confidence could you give us that you would deliver a better service, understanding you're the governors?
Yeah, I appreciate that.
What confidence can you give us?
I don't believe that there's any... it's not magically going to be a better service because it is planned and governed by the territorial authority rather than the regional authority. So I take that point. But from a strategic planning and integration point of view, considering it alongside every other part of our functioning transport network gives us a far greater opportunity to maximise the way that the transport network can contribute to our broader well-being outcomes. It's not necessarily any shade on on the work that is being done with, well, not within this building, but you know what I mean. It's just that there's always going to be lag, if you like, if not friction between two sets of staff doing that planning work, and the urgency with which we need to lean on public transport means that we're running out of time really for that. We can't wait for another regional public transport plan process in 5 years' time to look at how we might do it. But yeah, I mean, I completely accept the point that it's not magically going to be better. There's a lot of other things. There are a lot of other factors, but it makes sense from a strategically integrated transport network point of view for the network to be managed. I mean, aside from Whakaputahi, and we don't have time for that, to be managed by a single body.
Vanessa's listening right there now.
Councillor Wilson, you had a
Yes, I do. Two questions. Paragraph 13, you talk about the land value rates for bigger properties to pay for pest work. Are you? We heard this morning from Predator-Free Dunedin that 1/3 of all of the work to date has been paid for by Osprey, which is actually funded by farmers already. Given that, would you be prepared to? I mean, I'm not sure that you were aware that Osprey funds so much of that work and ongoing, and just wondering whether that is still equitable. That comment.
It's certainly disappointing that it takes a tuberculosis outbreak to receive such significant investment in pest control, which is how you get Osprey involved in the first place. This is the view of council and approving the submission, and I don't have a mandate to change that view at this point.
No, just fine. And if we were to put something in the long-term plan for trials for Dunedin City or anyone else, given that you're going to talk next week to the RPTP and we're not all involved in that, regrettably, could I understand how much and which of the first trials that you would like to see put in? And when?
I don't. I mean,
when and which trials?
That's premature, but I think that from a priority focus point of view, I think given and it's hard because we haven't made decisions around our transport projects either, but for example, should the Princess Street bus priority project be funded through our 10-year plan, looking at things like direct commuter services from the south would be an obvious place to start, or from, and I can say this now, no longer being a resident of that area, or from Port Chalmers, or those sort of, to try and shift commuters.
In the loop bus? No.
The council hasn't signed off on our submission to the regional public transport plan, but that stuff is outlined in there, and your staff will be able to give a more informed view than me as to what budget would be required to run various trials.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you, Mayor Hawkins. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your submission. And
it's easier being in your seat than this one.
and if Councillor Forbes could take control of those.
Kia ora koutou. Apologies, we're having ongoing issues here in the council chambers. So that we can get ahead, what we're proposing is that the Queenstown office, that you press on with the face-to-face presentations you've got there. These will continue to the live stream. It's just an issue here in Dunedin. And we will press on with the face-to-face ones here in Dunedin and reconvene when we are able to solve the issues here. Does that is that appropriate for you in Queenstown?
Can they see us or?
Sorry,
will the live
second,
stream pick up our submissions? Will it go to what these people are going to tell us? Will that go to the live stream so that we can look at it later for those that haven't seen it?
That's correct.
Correct. Yes. And so, okay, great. You can obviously hearing us now. And when we mute, it doesn't. Is that correct?
Say that again, sorry.
When we are muted, it's not going to the live stream?
When you are muted, it is not going to the live stream. That's correct.
Yep.
Okay. So Jasmine, so in the chamber, nobody can see us or hear us at the moment.
That's correct. What we can, like, I can see you through my computer, but the chambers themselves can't connect. So we'll continue to work on that, but we figured that the live stream is going. Councillors here can connect in and catch back up on that. And we think it's most valuable if you carry on in Queenstown. We've got Councillor Robertson and Councillor Laws also connected to you in Queenstown. And we will keep you posted.
Thanks, Jasmine.
Okay, thank you.
So it looks like you're cheering.
Yeah. So
you've been promoted.
Been promoted for a minute. Here we go. Okay, so we're not going to hear Wyatt's response because that's down there and that's what I'm on, but we'll go to the Wild and Conifers, and I just need to find there it is, booklet 1, submission 171. Let me just find that. Easy said and done. 1, submission 171. There are so many submissions.
How many is got in total?
There's about 1,300 pages. Not sure exactly how many. It's actually, I've actually loved reading them. It's been amazing.
Doing both, or just?
I'm here doing both.
All right.
How do I figure in both?
Yeah, I get shaping in future. We'll be carrying you.
I'm helping. I help him out.
Okay.
It's not that one.
I'm unelected, so he pays me money now.
Can you help me with what page it's on?
Oh, yeah, what are you?
I'm looking for Wild and Conifers, which is submission 171, not page 171.
It's in book 1.
Yeah, book 1.
Submission 171.
Which says Heritage New Zealand online. Okay.
Or is that another hit?
It's on page 380.
Thanks.
When the first time I'm gone.
I'm trying to say that heritage. He somehow blames me for his role.
Okay, I am with you now. So welcome to Grant, Rose and Vanessa, and away you go.
Okay, thanks, councillors. I'll keep it short and punchy. I thank you for your time. Under the proposed rates, or the plan rather, you're proposing to reduce the rate that you have levelled for the wild and conifers, both Otago, or Central Otago rather, and ourselves, and that reduction is about 5% or 13 cents per household. We submit that you shouldn't reduce it by that 13 cents. You have struck that rate, you have levied it for a couple of years, you should keep it there. And that by keeping it there, the natural increase in rateable properties actually accounts for the inflation, which is the point we're trying to make. Our funds are, of course, always eroded by inflation, as is every other person. And we have submitted for some time that you should build inflation into it. Indeed, we submit that you should eventually match the QLDC. We are not pushing that point today, but we are certainly pushing that you keep the rate where it is, and that will distribute the full amount, I might add. Not just the what is proposed at the 100,000 keeping, because that effectively is about. We need this money to access the MPI funds, and I know that's perhaps been figured in the background that MPI, and they have through the government with recent events, has had somewhat of a golden lining for the wild and tree business that you're well aware of. What you might not be aware of is that to access that funds for any private work, we've had to come up with 20%. That's where the funds that the ORC, that the QLDC and the private landowners put in are absolutely vital. Also, the funds cannot be used for a lot of things, like paying a funding manager soon, like the actual contract with DOC, putting in submissions so that we can clear the seeding source off, and the plan for clearing the seeding source off Queensland, and we cannot use the MPI funds for that. So without the contribution maintained and increased, we're facing a shrinking budget, and the money that has been invested to date will be lost or eroded if you do not keep this up. We are winning. We're clearly winning in places. The recent boost. It was interesting. Mayor Hawkins there made the point earlier on about the way you look after water and the pest control and that. I'll put it to you, and I know where it's been modelled. If we lose this battle, the Matara River goes dry at Fairlight. It's been modelled. That's the effect of wilding pines taking over. And if we don't stop them, who will?
Thank you. Thank you. Any questions? Gretchen, Michael? Okay. So is that modelling in our studies? Do we have that model at ORC?
I can't answer that, Alex, with you. You've got that there, but that's modelled. And Professor Marks from Otago University has done a lot of this work. The water yield loss from wild and trees takeover is in the region of 25 to 30 something percent once total canopy closure takes over.
And modelling was done by Land Care Research.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, so is there anything else you'd like to add? Well, that's pretty clear.
No, that's right. Please, just